from UH is our Associate Director for Student Engagement, Migdalia Maldonado. And tonight we're really delighted to be joined by at least three true, really remarkable UH alumni. And I'm looking forward to kind of an informal conversation here to start, and then opening it up to students to ask questions of your own. I thought we'd begin just by hearing each of them introduce themselves. Maybe tell us name, pronoun, like when you graduated, what your degree was in, and what your current occupation is. And why don't we go in alphabetical order by first name, shall we? So can we start with Abram?
Sure. And thanks for having me. Can you hear me okay? I've got external mic.
Yep.
I'm Abram Fox. He use he, him pronouns. I graduated in 2005 as an undergraduate with a double degree in history and in art history and archaeology. I actually stayed at Maryland for another decade or so and earned my master's and my PhD in art history, technically art history and archaeology as well. Currently, I work up 95 at Johns Hopkins University, where I am an academic advisor for the Krieger School of Arts and Sciences. So working with students in humanities, social sciences, and natural science majors.
Great, thanks. Andy?
Perfect. Usually, when we go by alphabetical order, I'm usually the first one. So, Abram, I'm glad you're here. So my name is Andy Park. I majored in biology, and then I minored in secondary education and a second minor in general business. And I'm currently based out of San Francisco. I work for Apple as a product marketing manager. Before that, I worked a lot of different jobs. I worked at Geico, and then I worked at Samsung, and I worked as a biologist at some point, as a teacher at another. So I've been kind of all over the place. So happy to join the panel and kind of see if there's any wisdom I can share. I still don't think I have. I'm still taking advice from other people, so I don't know if I'm the best person, but glad to be a part of it.
Oh, don't tell us that. We have you here for the wisdom.
Got to be humble, right? That's one.
Okay, there's some wisdom right there. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thanks. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Gilbert. I graduated from undergrad at Maryland in 2013, so 10 years ago, which feels crazy to even say. Time has flown by. But I majored in psychology, and I got a minor in human development. And I went straight into grad school at Loyola, so Loyola in Maryland. So stayed fairly local. I got my master's in clinical psychology there, and then I proceeded to start working in the mental health field. I've had various positions in the field, including doing crisis work with kids and adolescents, including working in a school. And most recently, currently, I operate my own private practice virtually right now, but hoping to get some office space in the new year, which is exciting. And so I've been building that for about a year now. And I also work part-time in community mental health. So I work as a clinical manager. I have a variety of different roles there. I've been at this particular agency for almost 5 years now. And so my day-to-day is very different. My work with clients in both positions that I'm in is very different, and I love it. So happy to be here. Happy to answer any questions.
Great. So I'm gonna get us started with a few questions for each of you, and I'll maybe just stick with the alphabetical order we've established. So Abram, you're up first. So before moving to Hopkins, where you're currently an advisor, you spent maybe 6-7 years as a coordinator in the honors college at Towson. And I was curious, what about your experience at UMD inspired you to devote so much of your professional career to working in university settings?
I've been lucky in that I, throughout my whole life, have had a lot of exposure to higher ed. My dad was a professor,
Okay.
so I got to be on campus on a couple of different college campuses in the area, or just knowing that he was, that was his line of work. So it was something that was pretty valued in my household. And so I had the benefit of like kind of just being very comfortable in education, in higher ed. And I really enjoyed the honors experience that I had as an undergrad. That's a place where I made a lot of friends. And, it's hard for me to be like, it's almost 2 decades out, but there's people who are still my friends. I'm still in the fantasy football league with the guy who lived across the hall from me freshman year.
Right.
And so I really enjoyed that environment. That was in part a reason that I decided to continue my education after undergrad, was to continue to grad school, because I enjoyed higher ed. I enjoyed kind of this intellectual environment, feeling challenged in a lot of different ways with people who had knowledge in many different areas. Through grad school, I kind of discovered that I enjoyed working with students more than I liked the solitary research experience. And that really is what propelled me to want to stay in higher ed and work in a student-facing experience, rather than try to become a professor or a researcher or a museum curator, which were sort of the stereotypical things that somebody with my degree did. Honors programs were actually like a thing that I was looking for work in, which is tough because there aren't that very many of them. Or most school has one, but there's not a ton of employees, which
Right.
So I was really excited to be in that environment, because it wasn't just about the direct student contact, but about being in an environment that was similar to what I had as a student. Smart people who like to challenge themselves in an environment where they are encouraged to do so by their peers. So it really, kind of felt a little bit like going back to college, like the good stuff, not
Right.
the classes and the tests, but the community environment.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Thanks for that. Andy, let me ask you one as well. So since you graduated a little bit more recently, 2017, you've held positions, I think you mentioned, at Geico, Samsung, and now Apple. But I was really struck by all that you did in the years leading up to graduation. So you were a research assistant and a teaching assistant here on campus. You were a peer mentor in UH. You did departmental honors in CBMG. You worked for a pension company, I think, for a bit, and you were an intern at the Defense Department. So that's a lot before you found your way, post grad and into full-time employment. So I'm wondering, looking back, whether there's a lesson or two that you learned in those early experiences that helped you in the full-time work you did after graduation.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a question that I get a lot, like even when I'm interviewing, right? And because it looks like it's kind of all over the place, and I'll be honest, it is all over the place. And I think starting even in high school, going into college, I don't think I had a goal in mind, and I think that really helped to like expand my scope of opportunities. And so even in college, I think university honors specifically, I chose the program specifically because it wasn't so narrow. It allowed me to explore so many different avenues. And that's like reflected in my kind of what I chose as my major and also my minors. And also whenever I was able to select different electives, I think, under university honors, I didn't pick any of the electives that were related to biology because I knew that I'm gonna major in biology, but I took classes in like music production, I took business classes, and I tried to kind of expand my horizons during college. And some could say that it's a risky pathway, but I think what I learned now, I felt like that was a good way about going through all of the motions of like, what do I want to do? And I think that's a question I still ask today. I don't think I stopped learning. And I don't think I've achieved or I don't feel like I'm at a place where I'm like, oh, this is where I'm at and this is everything I've achieved so far. I feel like I'm continuing to learn and continuing to kind of see what I want to do like from here on out. And so I guess my kind of what I learned through all of those is at a large level is I probably would do the same thing I did back then of like doing everything and just taking every opportunity as like, oh, I want to see if I like it or not. And by doing that, I realize I've learned about what I don't like. And that's something that is very hard to do unless you do like everything, right? And it's hard to know what you want to do, especially in college. And so for me, it was a process of like, oh, I didn't really like that as much as I thought I would. And then let's try something else. And I think college is the best time to do it. I still do it now. So it's never late to be like, I didn't really like that. I want to try something else. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, that's great. And that certainly, I think, aligns with, one of the objectives we have with the curriculum in today's UH, which allows for that kind of exploration. That's great. So Stephanie, you're up. So you, you mentioned after you graduated with a psychology degree from UMD, you went on to do an MS in clinical psych at Loyola, and you spent a number of years as a therapist and a counselor in a few different sort of contexts, right? You were with Catholic Charities for a while. You were with DC Prep, which is a network of charter schools in the Washington area. But then last year you took this really bold step of starting your own private practice, and I believe it's with adolescents and young adults that you mostly work in that practice. I'm curious if you'd share with us a little bit about that experience of starting the practice. I mean, I can imagine it was perhaps a little scary. I'm wondering whether being your own boss is as great as it sounds. Tell us a little bit about how that's gone for you.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate you asking that question. I would say I started my own private practice in my mind many, many years ago. Actually, Andy, it was interesting hearing a little bit about what you just shared, because I feel like since junior year of high school, I was kind of one track mind of I like psychology, I like mental health. And, starting from the beginning, I always envisioned myself in private practice. Now that specific vision definitely, took different turns throughout my experience, but clearly it led me back to it. And so, yeah, I mean, again, this has always been an idea in my mind about wanting to be a business owner, wanting to have my own practice, have my own clients, and everything that comes with it. And so it took a lot of organization and talking to friends and colleagues who are in the field, who took this step on their own as well. And then really just kind of, going step by step and not thinking too far into the future about what how I'm going to get to this place of getting enough clients, or of figuring out what electronic medical record system I'm going to use. It started off with simply registering for my LLC, and so I feel grateful to have had the support of friends and colleagues, like I said, who have already done this. That was pretty crucial. So it was a mixed bag of being a scary experience and a very exciting one as well. Aside from loving the field of psychology, I also enjoy business. And so I kind of get to wear two hats at one time. And doing this is never really, an ending type of feeling. There's always room for growth, whether that's growing my caseload, whether that's offering new group options or courses, or hiring employees, other therapists to join. So it's fun, it's exciting, and a little scary still. So.
And you must have had to pick up a bunch of new skills that you didn't maybe previously have, whether that's supervising staff or learning kind of the business side of business, the very kind of nuts and bolts practical stuff that we often take for granted showing up in a workplace, that needs to be in place in order to make a work environment work. Was that a lot? I mean, does that feel like a lot, or does it feel like just kind of a passion because it's your business and so you just naturally sort of lean in?
Yeah, it definitely was overwhelming and felt like a lot at first. I'd say the first few months of building it, more of the business side of it, and then the first few months of actually getting started with my own clients. I had been part of a group practice previously, but I wasn't the owner. I didn't have to deal with a lot of the admin work and logistics, and so that was a totally new world. My accountant probably is very annoyed with me because I asked many questions on the business side of things. And so, he's been great. And I've learned you just got to rely on those people that you have, because it will all come full circle at some point. So, yeah,
great. So let me ask, maybe I'm going to ask Abram and Andy both the same question. And in some ways, I'm just drilling down on some things that both of you already touched on. But Abram, your degrees are in art history, and you're now an advisor at Hopkins. Andy, your degree is in biology, and today you're a product market manager. I'm wondering if there were specific lessons that you took from those original areas of study that have served you well in very different kinds of professional activities. Were there things that you learned as a biologist, as an art historian, that serve, skills that translate, even though they are now in a completely different context in your professional lives? Andy, you want to start?
Sure. You took me off guard, Stephen. No, I'm happy to go first. So I think when people look at it from point A to Z, I think me going from biology to being a product marketing manager at Apple, it'll look like there's some madness going on. And I think there are so many points to get from A to Z, like A, B, C, and D. And I think every pathway was an inflection point of like, hey, what do I want to do next, is what I kind of asked myself at each of those different experiences that I had. And so I guess to paint a more better picture, I majored in biology, and then I worked at the Defense Intelligence Agency as like a biologist. And then I moved into Geico. And the move from biology to Geico, I worked a lot on the data side of biology. And so I worked with Python. I worked on a lot of data analysis, and I felt like I enjoyed that portion of it a lot more than the actual data collection that happens a lot. There's a long leadway in like biological research where you do data collection, you pipette all day, and then at the end of it, you kind of spend a couple of weeks doing the data analysis on Excel and Python or what have you on like MATLAB. And I really enjoyed that portion of it a lot more than the data collection. And so I thought about like what industries, what fields of studies can I kind of go into that will help me do more of the data analysis. And I realized that there's like financial services or like insurances where there's so much data, they don't know what to do with it, is what I learned from like what I was doing research on like careers. And so I figured, okay, let me take a crack at that. And I think the process going from biologist to as a product manager at Geico was a little bit strenuous. I struggled a lot trying to get into the business field to see like how do I interview as a biologist to get into business. And I did a lot of like self-studying. I used a lot of the UMD services of like going to get my resume looked at the center. And actually, I used a lot of the interview, mock interview sessions as well, to be able to get over that hurdle. And so I landed at Geico as a product manager, and then I shifted over to the marketing side at Geico as well. And that's when as a product manager, I was like, hey, marketing sounds like fun. And so that's when I made that change of like, what do I want to do next? I wanted to try marketing. And then at that point, I figured, hey, insurance was fun for about like a couple of years, but I want to try something more exciting, and consumer electronics seemed like the hot topic. And so I made that shift to Samsung. And then at Samsung, when I worked on consumer electronics, I worked on vacuums and air purifiers. And then a recruiter at Apple reached out talking about an Apple Care product marketing position. And it was like such a good like next pathway of like insurances and consumer electronics coming together. So it all kind of led me to this point of like, I don't know how I ended up here, but every single inflection point was what made me into what I am today. And so I would say that at the end of the day, I think I don't have any regrets. I feel like it was a good process. It's a confusing process for others, but I think every single experience was important for me. And I don't think, like I said, I'd like to take this and try new things into the future as well, for sure.
Great. Thank you. Abram?
So this is something I've actually, oh, go ahead.
No. I was just going to kind of repeat the question to remind you, but go right ahead.
Well, it's something that I like. I've had to think about a lot, because like Andy said, how did I get here from where I was?
Yeah.
So for me, academically, I mean, art history is a discipline of looking closely at things, of critical analysis. It's also, even though art is in the name to distinguish from normal history, it is normal history. It is a discipline that requires a lot of collecting, processing, and making meaning of disparate of data from disparate sources. And in that discipline, it's visual objects. It is textual records, like primary source material from the artists themselves, from the context in which they were creating, understanding there was a surprisingly significant amount of psychology involved, at least in certain approaches. I'm not sure that it is really up-to-date psychology, but there's a lot of thinking about things and trying to think about things in different ways, taking different lenses from which you're approaching the art, the artist, the culture, and making some meaning out of them. And so I think it really prepared me to do that. I feel very comfortable in positions where I'm processing data, where I'm trying to make meaning out of various pieces of information, which has served me well in work that I've done that's related to advising, to understanding degree programs. In my prior position when I was at Towson, there was a lot of admissions work. There's a non-zero chance I may have interacted with some of the students on our webinar today in an admissions context. There was a lot of like actual data crunching. And sure, when I was an undergrad, I did not use Excel at all. I did not do any of that sort of things. But when I came into a role where I was like, oh, you have to use this software, you have to use this, different spreadsheets and whatever. I was like, oh, okay. This is analyzing and thinking about data just in a different format.
Sure.
So that's been really helpful for me. It's just, I think if you would ask art historians, at their heart, they see themselves as detectives. And there's a lot of that sort of just that as well, of give me a problem, give me something complicated, and let me go through the texts, go through the resources that are out there, and find some meaning. And now, instead of doing it in the context of an 18th century painting, I do it in the context of a student who wants to major in chemistry and double major in English and go to med school. And so very different areas, but I think the skills, the skills develop transfer. And I'm very passionate in my own life and have been very passionate in working with students about the role of the humanities broadly, the humanities, the social sciences, the things that give you those analytical and conceptual skills that you can transfer to lots of different disciplines, lots of different professions, career paths.
That's great. Thank you. So let me, Stephanie, I've got one for you here. But before I ask it, let me invite students to begin entering questions in the chat. We've received a couple of questions from you kind of offline, and we will add those to the mix, those of you who submitted questions in advance. But everyone is more than welcome to begin entering questions in the chat, and we will include those in the hopper here. So Stephanie, on a bit unlike Abram and Andy, on paper at least, your path looks more sort of straight ahead. It looks more like there's a kind of really clear through line, direct path from the degrees you took and the work you're doing today. I'm wondering whether it felt that way, or whether there were, or what surprises you may have encountered along the way, what things that you may have encountered professionally, or for that matter personally, in the course of the last however many years, that maybe weren't as expected as the paper path would suggest.
Yeah, sure. I would say for the most part, it felt like a pretty straightforward path as you're describing, and as one would see kind of on my resume, so to speak. But definitely plenty of surprises along the way. A couple that stand out to me. Maybe not necessarily a surprise, but just somewhat of a roadblock and somewhat of a large consideration. For the most part in the mental health field, give or take a few positions, graduate school is almost like a requirement in order to get to that next step, whether that is to be a licensed therapist or psychologist, med school for some who are entering the psychiatry route. Graduate school is, like I said, kind of almost not, I won't say with 100% certainty, but almost a necessity. And so, that's a lot of weight there when I am in my junior and senior year of college, and kind of feeling like, okay, I love psychology. I always have. If I see a future in this field, I have to go to school. And that wasn't, a bad thing. I love school. I love learning. And I always have, but it's a big decision, and it kind of feels like once I make that decision, that means I'm even narrowing what is already straightforward path even more. And so if for whatever reason, I want to change courses, or I find a passion in something else, it felt like that would be much harder to do, because, the totality of my previous experiences in college, doing, helping out in some research labs, also doing some internships, all of that very much psych focused. And so, I already told you where I'm at right now. It all worked out in the end. But, even in grad school, similar thoughts popped up as well. I had moments of questioning, is this really what I want to do? Just feeling like it's a lot, which I think one can experience in any field as well. But, I tried out different positions once I graduated grad school, and ultimately, found where I'm at right now with what works. Long term, I think purely being in private practice, my own practice, is probably what my future will look like. But having some variety in my other position right now, and in my past positions also, did allow me to feel like I'm not so much stuck in a box here, and to weed out some things I don't like, to learn what populations I enjoy working with, I'm best working with, and all of that. So, I think I knew what I wanted to do from the start, that, in looking back 10 plus years, that's very clear. But there were moments of questioning, and that was scary.
Yeah. No, sure. And I think that's probably something that we've all experienced in different ways as we take these journeys. So we've got a question in the chat that I'll put to all of you before I turn to some of the questions that were submitted earlier. What is a piece of advice you wish you had been told as an undergrad? Something that maybe you had to learn the hard way after graduation, that or maybe it was a piece of advice that you were given that you didn't pay much of attention to. But what's some advice that maybe you wish you had heeded or received when you were still in school? Anyone want to start, or shall I just put you on the spot? Abram.
I'll start, because so this is advice that I wish I had gotten, and because of my role, I get to give this advice. So I get to think of it a lot. When I really appreciated hearing Stephanie talk about her, experience coming up to graduation and career stuff. When I was getting ready to graduate as an undergrad, I had no idea what I was going to do. I had no idea what I wanted to do, and that was a lot of that was on me, because I was sort of kind of drifting through college. I was doing well, and so sort of keeping the just staying on the course. So my advice, and this is what I tell a lot of students, is everybody who you are going to interact with in a support office, in an advising office, in a counseling center, in a writing center, in a career center, folks like you, Stephen, who are in the student-facing roles. You have that job because you like to work with students. And in fact, working with students is what makes you have a job, and is where your paycheck comes from. So take advantage of these resources. They are there. The folks who work there want to support you. They're in that line of work because it's valuable to them. But at a large institution, especially a place like College Park, it's very different from high school. People aren't seeking you out, the folks in those roles. You kind of have to take the impetus to go there. The folks are friendly. They want to work with you. As students, you have already paid for those services. They're not free, but you already paid for them. So take advantage of those offices. I think I'm happy where I am, and I probably would have always ended up in this work, but had I taken the time to visit the Career Center more frequently, or at all, taking the time to make a closer relationship with my advisor, stuff like that, I think I would have had more direction and more confidence about my post-graduation career.
No, it's something that I think it's easy to be unaware of, that once you get out into the big bad world, you're not surrounded by a bunch of offices that are just waiting for you to make an appointment, right? And ask these kinds of questions. Andy, Stephanie, advice that you wish you had heeded, or wish you'd been told when you were in school?
Chime in. To kind of piggyback off of what Abram is saying, opportunity is just the word that comes to mind. To really explore and try out, as many opportunities that are thrown your way that seem of interest to you, not just academically, definitely, personally on that, pleasurable side of things too. And, in my work with clients, I work with a lot of people in this transition from high school to college, those in college already, and I think a lot of fear and anxiety shows up when it comes to new opportunities, whether those are social opportunities, meeting people, joining clubs, whatever it might be. And so one, throwing out an anxiety strategy here, one thing I like to tell a lot of my clients who are in college in this stage of life is we get very much focused on the present moment, which is great. There's a lot of benefit to that, but sometimes it's helpful to take a step back and think, okay, if my fear right now is pushing me to avoid joining X, Y, and Z group or meet so and so, will an awkward encounter actually matter 1 year from now, 10 years from now? if the answer is no, then just go do it, because there's a lot of benefit and value that can come from taking that step. Maybe nothing will happen, maybe something will. If it's awkward, if it's bad, again, it probably won't matter long term. And so just expose yourself to new opportunities. I wish I got that advice.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great.
Yeah. Stephanie, I want to add, that's something I still struggle with. I think anxiety of like talking to new people in new environments. So that's definitely great advice. And at the end of the day, you realize like no one cares about you. And you know, there's a good thing about it and a bad. I mean, it might be bad to think of it that way, but at the end of the day, you do what you do without, and no one at the end, like no one's gonna remember what you said this one time. And that's exactly that's really something I need to remember to think about as well. But I think for me, a piece of advice I would share is, I think it might go against what Abram was saying, but like be cautious or be wary of what advice people give to you, and make sure that you know that's something that is true for you. No one knows you better than yourself, and I think for me, I would say to Abram's point is that talk to a lot of people, and I think expand your kind of and learn from everyone, not from a single individual. I think in college or the early stages of my my college life and during my early stages of my career, I think a lot of people like told me what to do, but I had like inclinations to try new things, and at a certain point I was like, hey, I'm just gonna do what I want to do. And I think at certain points I wish I had done that a little bit earlier. There were opportunities that I wish I'd taken, or that I'd done something different earlier, but I was kind of held back because I was afraid everyone was telling me not to do something. And so I would say take advice, but use your best judgment. Your best kind of you know yourself best. So yeah.
So that's actually, thanks for that, Andy. That's actually a really nice segue to a question that that came in earlier that that I can put to all three of you, which is what is something that that when you were in school you thought was really important that turned out not to be nearly as important as you thought it was? And I think maybe we could sort of add to that the opposite. What's something that you thought wasn't so important, that didn't, you know, that really didn't seem to matter, that in retrospect it mattered a whole lot more with sort of the perspective of time? Is there something that falls into either one of those buckets for any of you?
Yeah. Yeah, I think something comes to mind. And I'll also just say, I think what Andy just said actually does not contradict what I said at all. You definitely want to take, you know, understand where the advice is coming from, and kind of keeping it to yourself, or processing it through, you know, what's your values. What I realized after graduation that I didn't see at the time that was really valuable was the relationships that I was building with my peers, but also with faculty. You know, and this helped me out a lot, specifically because I continued at Maryland for grad school. But even had I not, you know, I would have known people who were in fields that I was interested in. And looking back now, I can see the beginning of the network that I still have today that continues to be beneficial for me, that I was developing while I was a student. I think the thing that I actually wasn't super invested in, but still more so than I realized, was like individual grades in specific classes, even like overall GPA, the sort of thing. Not saying that it's not important, but like within a certain level, one or, you know, a percentage point or a tenth of a GPA or something, like that's not going to make as much of a difference as skill development and connections and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, to add to Abram, I agree completely on both of the points of like what's not important and what is important. But to kind of add to like the relationships, I think college is like the best time where you're almost to the point where it's like too much, like too many people everywhere. But I think it's good to kind of absorb all of it. It's like the best time. When else are you going to be able to meet so many people from all walks of life, and whether that is your peers, the other students, or with like professors with years and years of like wisdom. Like you really don't get that chance like aside from college or grad school even. And so I think talking to a lot of people, and I think the more you widen that scope of like, I don't like, maybe network is not the right word, but like widen the scope of like different perspectives, it really builds up your empathy for people with different ideas, with different thoughts. And especially in this kind of day and age with everything that's going on in the world, whether that is in the workplace, whether that is in your personal life, I think being able to empathize, I think in this world, I think we're moving into a world where like we don't have enough of it. And I feel like knowing all their different perspectives and like trying to know where they're coming from, I think is like the college is the best time to kind of learn that. And it really kind of going back to like the business side of things, or not business, but like your career wise too, you're going to encounter so many different people, and you'll learn how to overcome those like friction points when like someone disagrees with you. How do I handle this, right? You learn a lot of that by actually practicing, and people don't really give credit to like building up your social skills because they think it's like natural. You're born with a certain like gravitas or like certain charisma, but it's really not true. You have to build that up and learn how to talk to people, learn how to engage in a professional way, whether that is with your peers or with your manager or maybe even the VP. Like, how do I say things in one way or another? So I think those are the skills that I didn't really think that was important, but looking back on it, like I use so much of the social skills that I learned in college that even today. But to Abram's point, the grades, no one cares about your grades at the end of the day. So I think I was one of the people that really did care about it, but no one asked for your GPA in my career right now. So I think it's okay if you get a B or a C. So I think it's just something, and I have had my share of these, and retaking some courses. So yeah.
And anybody who's still reporting their GPA years out is probably not the person you want to be hanging with anyway. Stephanie, anything come to mind?
I don't really have anything vastly different from what Abram and Andy are saying, but to just throw out a lighthearted answer here, I was always have been big into Maryland sports. So what seemed very important to me was Maryland had to beat Duke in basketball, and you know what? It's okay when they didn't, but I did see a couple wins, so that was good.
So I mean, maybe that's an answer to the question I was going to ask next about an experience. I don't know, when I look back, and I'm older than all of you, but when I look back and think on my experiences in school, there are over time there's a lot that obviously fades from view, and then there are things that seem never to leave you, right? That are in a certain way unforgettable. So I'm wondering if there was an experience that you had, be it academic or not academic, be it personal or social or what have you, that you appreciate more now than you did when it happened. Something that's, I don't know, grown in significance over time, that at the time it was, maybe not as significant as it seems today.
I guess I can start off with this one, and I'll just kind of give first thing that comes to mind. And that really is meeting, my person, my best friend very early on in my college experience. I felt the honors college community by being in the dorm. At that time it was Denton. I don't know if that's still the case, but on my floor, couple rooms down, the first week is where I got super close with my now best friend. And my sister was a senior when I was a freshman at Maryland, and she was in a sorority. She had a big social group. She would have loved for me to join. But for me, and I always questioned that throughout my experience at college, quantity over quality. But in looking back, just simply that first week of really bonding with my now best friend really kind of shaped my, and I think her experience as well. And so when I look back on it, kind of that one of those days in that first week where we went on a walk with a bunch of people and we bonded over, I think, liking Dawson's Creek, the show, if people know that. And that, that will always just stick with me. And we're best friends to this day. We talked earlier this week. We both had our first children this year. So, that played a huge role in my overall college experience.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, the relationships, I think you don't think about at the moment, like, oh, this is going to continue to be a really strong relationship for 5, 10, 20 years. I mean, I joked about fantasy football. One of my son's best friends is the child of 2 other honor students who met while they were together at Maryland. And like, we're still, they live in Pittsburgh, so it's not like we see each other regularly, but they FaceTime and everything. And so like just seeing those connections grow. And last week at Hopkins, there was a Maryland professor who came and talked, and it was a guy that I did a study abroad with when I was an undergrad. And I came, I went to it, I introduced myself, and he knew who I was. And it was so cool to like just have those relations, like those sort of things you don't appreciate them in the moment, but they seem really big. Also, on a lighter side, winning a national championship in basketball, that's pretty exciting. And when that happens your freshman year, you're like, oh, this is going to be great.
Andy?
I think for me, the most memorable is taking that music production course, university honors, which I probably would never have done if it wasn't offered through university honors. And funny story, I joined a band, so I'm singing with a band next month. And I make covers on like Instagram and YouTube, and it keeps me sane. I think so. I'm so busy at work, and I'm sure everyone is busy. And studying for exams, but it's really important to find your hobbies, or whether that's just sitting around, that's perfectly fine too. Sleeping all day could be a hobby, but something that really helps you like unwind or like de-stress is so important, even as a student. So I would say like taking those courses and like trying out new hobbies is what I think university honors really helped me widen my scope of like my interest, and like the number of people that have so many different hobbies, so many different interests was amazing to me. And I learned a lot from those courses and from the people that I met through those diverse courses. Yeah.
That's great. So we've got just a few more minutes, and I'm going to put you all on the spot, even more maybe than I have already, and ask you. I mean, I've never signed up for an alumni panel as myself, and you all sort of volunteered to be here with us tonight. And it strikes me that you would only have done that had there been sort of a message or some nugget of wisdom that you felt like you wanted to impart, something you wanted to share, something that maybe you haven't mentioned already. But I wonder whether there's something, we've got a group of, I don't even know what the head count is, but there's got to be 100 first, second, third year students with us here tonight. Is there something in closing that you would say to them? Migdalia tells me 88. Is there something that you would say to them that maybe you wish you had heard in this kind of setting? Well, I suppose Zoom might not have been the setting way back when, but something that you wish you had heard, or something that you want to make sure that you say to them as they sit here tonight.
Yeah. When I was an undergrad, and before and a little bit after, I was pretty shy. And I was the sort of person who did not talk in class. I listened, paid attention, but was terrified to talk. And a lot of the things that I was involved in as a student outside of class, especially when in my first year or two, were things that I had done in high school or experiences that I had previously had. And so I intentionally and unintentionally spent a lot of time in my comfort zone. And I know it's kind of hackneyed to be like, yeah, get outside of your comfort zone, try new things, all that. I think I felt like I had to take big steps in order to be meaningful. If I wasn't sitting at the front of the class, raise my hand at every single thing, then it wasn't worthwhile. And so I felt very much an all or nothing, that it took a lot of time to break. So I think I want to like validate it's okay to not want to be the rock star who's answering everything, even if you know the answer to every question. But like little steps are important. And so don't be afraid of taking little steps because you feel like it's either got to be something huge and meaningful or nothing at all. I mean, I think that's something that took me a long time to learn.
Oh, that's great. I appreciate that. Stephanie, Andy, any closing words?
Sure. I guess I would say, a lot of people give the advice when entering college or when in college to enjoy this stage of life as much as you can. Like college is the best time of your life. College, those 4 years or however long, there's going to be the best years of your life. And not to say that they aren't or they can't be, but I think that can be a little depressing for thinking about post-college. And so I would say, yes, enjoy as much as you can your experience there, embrace both the academics and the personal, aspect of it as well. But, it's ultimately your stepping stone for your future. And there is so much to enjoy and appreciate about the next steps, about your 20s, your 30s. I can't speak to later than that, but take in as much as you can,
it
enjoy it.
continues after your 30s, I promise.
Great. So yeah, they can be the best years, but there can also be better years too.
Thank you.
For me, closing remarks, I think back in college, I worked as like a chair on the peer mentor program to kind of build that up. I don't know if that's still happening today, but through those processes, I talked about how I like got feedback from my resume and learned about how to do participated in like interview workshops as well. I actually participated on the other side of the end of like trying to give other students feedback on resumes. And I think for me, I learned so much more from whoever I was giving the advice to. Like there were some people that brought in resumes or were doing interviews amazingly, and I was like, what are you doing here? Like you're doing so much better than I am. I don't feel like I should be giving you advice. So like that really inspired me to approach like even these sessions where I'm on the panel, but I learn a lot more. And I participate in panels where it's kind of live in person as well, because some of the questions that students ask are so insightful, some questions that I've never even thought about and are very difficult to answer. And so I think it really, I approached it and I participated because I wanted to learn from other panelists, right? Like Stephanie and Abram have different perspectives, different walks of life. So that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to join, to meet like other people, to learn from them. And so my piece of advice would be, closing thoughts would be like, approach all of these experiences, go talk to as many people as possible, because like every opportunity is a learning opportunity, whether you liked it or you didn't like it. Then next time you can be like, I didn't really enjoy that as much, I'm not going to do it. But every panel, every like environment where I get to talk to people and meet new people, it has been a great experience for me. Like I gain a lot of information, insightful things from fellow UMD TERP students. So yeah.
Well, that's a that's a terrific note. I think to close on. I just want to thank all three of you for giving back to the program, giving of your time on a weekday night when, you know, there are lots of other things going on. I suppose it's not sort of quite evening in San Francisco, Andy, but Abram, Stephanie, sounds like you've got little ones at home at least, and so I'm really grateful to you for spending some time with us here tonight, and I know that in that I speak for all the UH students who are on this webinar or who will be watching it after the fact. So thank you all. Congratulations on the well-rounded lives you're all leading. That is no small accomplishment, I know. So well done. We're proud of you in that. And with that, I think we can wrap up and say good night.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Be in touch.
Thanks.
Stop.
Bye-bye.
Bye.